Hey everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to the Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today we're joined by Rachel Donnelly, author of the book Late to Your Own Funeral, and the founder and CEO of AfterLight. Rachel's mission is both bold and compassionate to help the living deal with dying. After serving as the executor for both her mother's and uncle's estates, all while juggling a full-time job and raising two children, sandwich generation right there, Rachel saw firsthand just how overwhelming estate and legacy tasks can be. That experience inspired her to create AfterLight, a company that helps families navigate the complex world of estate settlement and legacy planning with clarity and care. Before founding AfterLight, Rachel spent her career in development at institutions like Emory University, Georgia Tech, and the Shepherd Center Foundation. She's a proud graduate of Agnes Scott College and lives in Decatur, Georgia, with her husband and two children. Welcome, Rachel. I am thrilled to have you as a guest. I know this is going to be insightful and give clarity to people on something that really can save so much stress and burden on the backside of somebody passing. So welcome, and you said your mission is to help the living deal with dying.
Yeah.
Can you share how your personal experience led you to that?
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here, and hopefully we're gonna, as I say, put the fun in funeral and talk a little bit and make this a little bit fun and cheeky to talk about some of these very, very tough topics. But yeah, I came to this work just like I said, based on my own experiences, right? Losing both of my, unfortunately I lost my dad when I was a teenager, and then fast forward and I had two young kids and was married, and my mom got sick and passed away within 60 days of a brand new job that I had just started. So in my first 90 days, I was on sort of this probationary period, right, where I wasn't supposed to have any time off. And my mom was sick, had major surgery, and died during those first 60 days of that new job. And that's the time when you're supposed to be really wowing your boss, right? And I was wowing nobody. And I was then thrust into the world of estate settlement, then taking care of my mom's brother, my mom's brother, my uncle, who was in latter stages of Parkinson's disease, all while trying to do all the things that you're doing when you're working and living and raising kids. And I thought, my goodness, why isn't there a quarterback, a skilled project manager who can help me with all of these logistical tasks that are really unavoidable, right? When you lose a loved one, there are things that, despite the best planning, that just have to be done, right? When somebody dies, you've got to clean out their fridge. You've got to, safeguard the cars. You've got to figure out what to do with all of their clothes. You've got to, fill out all this paperwork. And so that sort of time and administrative burden exists, and is most of the time unavoidable. So I really wondered why there wasn't that skilled professional that could walk alongside this and take some of those tasks off my plate. So that's where the genesis of this business came.
Yeah, people, if you don't have a plan and you're dumped with, I don't know their passwords, I don't know what they have, I don't know their logins, I don't know what bank they bank with.
Yeah.
Like, if you are really in the dark on some of these things, and this could be somebody that you talk to on a weekly basis, but you don't know that next layer.
Right.
And something happened.
Yeah.
And to be left with kind of a sea of turbulence, like you're just like floating along, what do I do next? And really you're just worried about getting through, because in those moments you're just taking what you can when you get it. And it's like, okay, I got this letter, I got that phone call, I need to deal with that. But really there may be something higher level that you should be dealing with. So you come in and help them, guide them, and say, hey, this is the big picture. Let's get to know who like the scenario. How much do you know?
Yeah, and
Okay.
peeling back the layers of that onion, and I think to your point earlier, most people don't plan for their own death, right? So we don't really talk about it. So then therefore we don't know what is waiting for us on that other side of it, right? We talk a lot about grief, but we don't talk a lot about the administrative burden that lies with death. And so with that, people are usually caught off guard and having to recreate sort of that wheelhouse of doing all these tasks. So most of the time when clients come to us, they don't even know what sort of sequence and protocol that they should start with, right? How should we start pulling back the layers of the onion? And sometimes it's like taking a car into the shop and you've got to open up the hood and see what's under there and say, okay, here's how we're going to move forward. But most of the time people don't know what step 1, step 2, step 3 is, right? And they think everything has to be done all at the same time, all at once, right? And there is certainly a triage to things that need to be done, and people will come to me and I'll say, okay, let's put that aside for now. Let's focus on this, and then we'll kick that can down the road and then handle that later.
And I know you talk about dumpster fires.
Yeah.
And, how to avoid those. And something I love how you said, what do we have to close, transfer, archive? Like, here's the list. And like you say, to be able to triage that in the moment of grief when someone's going through the loss of any kind of loss, whether it's sudden or expected or anticipated, rather, not expected, but anticipated, that is significantly, that's enough on its own. And so to have kind of a guide saying, hey, come this way, let's work on this, and to just have that guidance knowing that, okay, I'm spending my time in something that is the thing I should be spending my time in right now.
Right.
Because when you're in that space, I mean, I know a lot of times it just feels like numbness and you exist, but you're just kind of operating.
Yeah.
And if you find out you're operating and you're working on something that you should have been working on this to avoid that.
Right.
You just don't know. We always say you don't know what you don't know. And that's what I'm hoping here is that we get some experts in that can help adult kids as they're listening on their commute to understand some of these things. And hey, if you're, 18 and over, I love how you explain estates. It's like people say, oh, I don't have an estate. That would have been my dad. I don't have an estate.
Yeah.
And you say, if you own something or you owe something,
Yeah.
you have an estate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that is just I love that. I am going to steal that from you.
Well, I stole it from a great attorney, so
Okay.
we're just going to keep sending that message out.
Great.
So, yeah.
Because that's such a brilliant way to say it, because I hear that so much. I don't have anything to leave. But then they do. They had a house, and you know what? They took out a reverse mortgage, but their child didn't know about it, and now they passed. And the child's like, oh, we have a reverse mortgage on the home. And it's like, you didn't think you had anything.
Yeah.
And so tell us more about some of the scenarios, like first steps to people. Like I say, if you're over 18, get things in order. If you owe or own, get things in order. What are some high level things you can talk to people? Because you mentioned this death administration fatigue or death admin fatigue.
Yeah.
That it's just hours and hours and hours for the person that is left behind to get through things.
Yeah.
Give us some scenarios of like high level, what can we do to encourage people to plan and to make better decisions while we still have the capacity to do so.
Yeah. And, I think it's always looking at what's the end in mind that you want to have happen and then sort of reverse engineering it from that. Like, what is it that you want to come out on the other side? Not just who's going to receive what and what assets, but also who's going to be in charge. What tools in the toolbox do they need to have in order to complete this job? Because being an executor is very much a part-time job. It can take over 500 hours of effort to settle an estate. So when you think of that, that is a part-time job. Sometimes it can take years to settle an estate. So when you think of that with that end in mind, and this is a part-time job that I need to prepare somebody for, then like you said, you alluded to, like creating a basic inventory of your assets and debts. Write down where you bank, your 401ks, your pensions, what you own, the credit cards, the car loan, the mortgage, right? you gave, your nephew $5,000 to start his new roofing business. That's an IOU that you need to make sure, right, is somewhere included. Who owes you, and what do you own, and what are the assets of your estate? And then also making sure that you're including both your digital assets in that. How do you store photos? Where are your digital photos, your memories, right? What email addresses you use. And so I can help people. We can get into a very complex online digital vault, or it can be as simple as creating a spreadsheet, right? Or sometimes people will go with pen and paper to write down assets and liabilities. And that will not only help if you are just getting started in creating an estate plan and will be working with an attorney, that will be that sort of legwork then to go in. So, and facilitate that plan alongside that attorney. But starting with sort of that inventory of assets and debts, who will you want to be in charge, both your executor, your financial, your durable power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney. If you have minor children, who do you want to be their guardian? So thinking through, who do you want to drive the bus, right, on all of those things is a great way to start. There are, all the times free things that you can do, which I've just mentioned, creating those lists and thinking about who you want to be in charge. But looking at your beneficiary designations, are they up to date and are they reflected? Like, you won't believe the number of times that people have outdated beneficiary designations of an ex-spouse or somebody who's died, right? Or it doesn't reflect their end in goal. So, but yes, I think it's starting with, like I said, that basic picture of what you own, what you owe, who will be in charge, and then what will they need to know in order to fulfill that job will be helpful as you get that estate planning journey started, or revisit and revise it.
Yeah, because in the category of having an inventory, if you don't have one, I mean, assets might be lost or unidentified. If nobody knows. I think in one of your examples, there was somebody that was married and his mom was still listed as his beneficiary.
Yeah.
That was news to his wife.
Yeah.
Those life events that, if you're going through one or had one, or you've had it 15 years ago, but you didn't change anything. Yeah. Hopefully this gives you that little task memory thing of, I really should go in and do that because A, that person's not living anymore, or B, we're not married anymore, or I am married and I want them included now.
Yeah.
Just to revisit.
Absolutely. And that's what I try to help people understand it. This is like a living, breathing plant that needs to be watered every once in a while, right? Your estate plan, your documents are not a one and done exercise. And many people think, oh, I've got a will, I'm done. Okay, that's fantastic that you have one. But like I said, do you also have that durable power of attorney, that health care directives that will help someone if you're incapacitated, right? Advocate on your behalf, both financially and healthcare wise, right? And then does your will reflect, who you want to receive assets, to be in charge? When my mom died, she had a will, but who she had chosen to be the executor didn't want to do it. Right. So, and we ended up, it then became, de facto to my sister and me, but that was still an extra layer of, right.
And the communication,
and we had to go through that process, just more paperwork and more time. And then, my sister and I didn't have all the tools in the toolbox to do the job. Right. So think of it as that, who's been deputized with these roles, and then do they have, like I said, the tools to do that job? Because I feel like we spend so much time deciding who's going to get what and very little time about, do we have the right person?
Right. Is that right person in the right seat to make those decisions?
Yeah.
And the thing when you're talking, I know people always think, I'm going to have a voice. I'm going to be able to share and say what I want, what my wishes are. And I wish that was the case, but it's not. If you become incapacitated, if something happens, you are at the mercy of whatever exists that is your written word and your wishes. Yeah. Because that's not the case all the time. And I wish it could be. And again, you and I, when we talked earlier, we said, this is sometimes the conversation that people are like, oh man, like this is heavy.
It's heavy, yeah.
Everything on my podcast is heavy, but it's
Yeah.
heavy and, like you say, with a bit of lightness. I like your fun and funeral.
Yeah.
But talking about wills and probate and people understanding, I feel like we don't have any kind of life 101. And if our parents give it to us, great. If we go and seek it out, great. You have to go get information, have a professional locally verify and have the knowledge and the ability and the skill level.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even understand what probate is. A lot of people think you have a will, you don't go through probate.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And it is this whole world is confusing, and it's full of jargon, and each state has their own laws, right, and their own terminology, and so that can be very hard to navigate and for people to really understand what to do. And then you won't believe the number of people who come to me and they'll say, well, such and such friend said that I should go ahead and move all of the money out of the bank account before we've file the death certificate, right? And I'm like, just the bad advice that people get, right? And because it's something that they've heard from a friend of a friend, or they've seen on TikTok, or who knows where they've gotten it. So it's with anything, there's misinformation. And that's why doing this now, while you're able, you've got the cognitive ability, you've got the family surrounding you, this should be something that you're having continued conversations around. It's not just an end of life thing. This is something, I think knowledge is power, and the more that you're equipping yourself with the knowledge, with that ending goal, and you're bringing in your family and whoever's going to be in charge of those conversations, the better the outcome and the less anguish there'll be, and a little more ease during a really difficult time.
Right. I think there's two ways your clients come to you, proactively on the legacy side of planning, and then the other side reactively, somebody has passed, and then the after loss, right?
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things, because I know the people that don't have anything in place, I think, are the majority.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. You say
unfortunately,
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think when we spoke, you said that number is actually growing as far as the percentage that are not preparing.
Right. I mean, the number of Americans who have a will has gone down. I think it's 6 percentage points from a various study that I read. I think it was Caring.com. Went from 33% to 26%. So that's more than 6 percentage points. That the number of Americans who have a will. So it's going down. There was a huge influx during COVID, right? People were really scared, and that incentivized them to go get their affairs in order, but sort of how quickly we have forgotten, right? So, the number of people, we're going the wrong way is what I'm saying, right? And so, and why is that? We were scared. That made us all think about our own mortality, but then it's something that we don't want to think about, right? And I think if we sort of address that as well out of the gate, this is hard. This can be really hard to face our own mortality. We all have a discomfort around that. So I think that's number one. Like, let's just throw it out there. This is tough stuff. Like, this is not, nobody's, whistling down the road saying like, I'm going to get my will done. I'm so excited, right? So just acknowledging that and saying that we know that this is hard, this is full of a lot of decisions, uncomfortable conversations, can be like, okay, like we're just going to lay it out there. But then having that knowledge and having that education around it, like I said, and knowing what that end in mind is, it's just going to help everybody, on the other side of it.
And that's like, this is called Not Ready Yet, and Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. And that is because the not ready yet is that moment of taking no action.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's on the other side of that not ready yet? And it's different for every family.
Yeah.
But it's working through that to clear a path to, on the other side of not ready, is action and getting things taken care of. And we all hear, I don't want to be a burden, but my goodness, my goodness, if there is not a plan in place, the
Yeah.
burden that is left, and the
Yeah.
family members that have to come together to decide.
Yeah.
And your voice, I say, I'm big on agency. I say it every episode. Be the narrator of your own story. This is
Yes.
your life. You've
This
come
is your
far.
legacy. This is, I use this sort of dinner party analogy all of the time, which is, imagine that you're hosting this grand dinner party, you're inviting friends over, you're planning the menu, you're getting all the food, right? And then you're going to, of course, host the dinner, clean up afterwards, vacuum, mop the floor. And then you reach out to your friends and you say, hey, why don't you go buy all the food? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. And then why don't you come over here and cook it? And then why don't you come over here and clean my house? And then, oh, why don't you stay afterwards, do the dishes, clean, mop the floor, vacuum, right? Put away the china, right? That's essentially what we're doing when we do zero planning, is we're
100%.
leaving people to host that dinner party, and it's something that they didn't invite you to, right? So, that and people cringe when you say that. Like, doesn't that make you uncomfortable?
Oh yeah. No, I'm sitting here, but I'm thinking, wow, what a great analogy to leaving without having any kind of direction for anything you've left behind.
Yeah, and there are times
that's a
it's
pickle.
not. Yeah, and there are times it's not like tragedies happen. I am well aware of that. There are times where things just aren't going to be possible to be proactively coordinated and planned ahead. I understand
out,
that.
right.
But the number of times that I hear my kids are smart, they'll figure it out. My estate is simple, to which I say, simple for whom? Right? Like, what does that mean? As you alluded to earlier, or I don't have an estate, I'm not old enough, right? It's morbid, I don't want to think about it. And we're all just shuffling off our work onto somebody else that didn't ask for it. And I get kind of upset and angry about it, because I was forced to make decisions, to do tasks, to take a year, to quit a job in order to do things that I didn't ask for, right? I was not ready yet to be an orphan, right? I was not ready yet to be a caregiver for an aging loved one and do that alongside of, growing my career and raising my kids. But unfortunately, that was the reality that I was thrown into. Was it unfair? Absolutely. Could it have been worse? Yes. Do I wish it would have turned out differently? Yes. Right? So if you're listening to this is the greatest act of love that you can do for your family. Like, this is your dinner party, baby girl. Pull on your big pants and do a couple of things that's going to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. The weight of what you're giving people when you said, I think 500 hours. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That's a number. When you're giving them back time.
Yeah.
You're giving them back time.
Which is our most precious asset.
Right. And in a time of grief on top of it.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy, the 500 hours. It is like a part-time job that you're not paid for at that point.
Yeah, it really is. And then, that's why I created this business, is because I didn't have time to grieve, right? I had zero time to grieve, being, an orphan in my early 30s, right? And not having time to really process that and take care of myself. And we all need that. We all deserve that, right? Is there still going to be the time tariff around settling someone's estate despite all the best planning? Yes. Can we cut down on those number of hours in time by planning ahead? 100%. So that's the real message I'm hoping to get across.
Yeah. And so with adult kids listening, do your planning. And I've heard of some beautiful scenarios where, you start doing your planning, invite the conversation with your parents.
Yes, 100%.
Share with them that what you're learning. And, are you seeing that as a trend too, that the sandwich generation is saying, I'm going to get my affairs in order, and then kind of open up the conversation with my aging parents?
That's a lot, or I recommend that. I'm like, don't do this at talking at them. You need to turn that around on yourself as well, right? Is your plan, do you have an estate plan? So that can be a great parallel process to say, I am getting my affairs in order. I'm working with this attorney. I'm working with AfterLight to create a system for my executor, what have you. This is how it's made me feel. I feel like the weight's been lifted off, right? And just start sharing that, having that conversation and see how they respond. You know, a lot of people tell me that their parents shut down. They will not have these conversations. And to which, you know, I say, try to listen, try to come to this compassion and concern. And maybe if you don't have a dumpster fire story, read my book and take one of the hundreds in there and steal it and say, I heard about this family. This is what happened. I don't want this to happen to us.
And a lot of times they're just not ready yet. Again, because I interviewed Amy Cameron O'Rourke, who she was a care manager for like 18,000 plus families.
Oh, wow.
And even with her own father, it took him 2 years to feel vulnerable enough to share his financial position.
Yeah.
And, you know, so this is her profession, leading all of these families and in her own home. But she understood that. And it's like, start planning your own. It becomes like that conversation that they get curious, and again, are they going to share 100%? We don't know. It's not a moment. It's not a yes or no. It's planting the seed that I want to know, and I want to I want to talk to you about this. And when you're ready, we can come back to it. It's not you're sitting down saying, I need to know everything right now. Tell me now. That's not how these conversations work.
No,
right.
No, it's not. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to be able to, and people are going to they're going to tire quickly, possibly, from the conversation. So make this a family meeting. You know, I always say, people sometimes look at me like I'm crazy, but I say talk more than turkey at Thanksgiving, right? Like, use this as a time to maybe reminisce about family stories, and then let's talk a little bit about what's the plan. What have you got? How old is it? Where are documents located? And then you can revisit often, like I said, to sort of water that plant.
And the answer of I have it, I'm good is like, well, when's the last time you revisited it? You know, having little follow-up questions just for them to think. One thing in that conversation that I wanted to bring up is you're very passionate about the co. Could you talk to us about what that means?
Yeah, as I say, friends don't let friends name co-executors. And, you know, I've gotten some pushback on it. This is my personal opinion, right? And I've seen attorneys that I love, right, you know, do this for a lot of clients, and it's just not my preference. I just think that, and this is me coming from personal experience, my sister and I were co-executors together. We get along great. We live close to each other. It just made things so much more complicated, right? I think it's a logistical issue, first and foremost. Every time you've got to call an institution, every time you've got to sign a form, you know, every time get something notarized, right? You both have to go do it. It's a double process. I'd have to bring my sister in on the phone call to call the bank or whoever we were speaking with. And it was just an extra layer of complication that just, I think, is unnecessary. Deputize one person, in my opinion, to be that co-executor, or to be that executor, to be that durable power of attorney, to be that healthcare proxy. And if you have multiple children, you know, maybe switch up those roles, right? And say, I'm going to have one child be the healthcare power of attorney. I'm going to have one child be the financial power of attorney and executor. But for me, it's just a logistical thing. Someone's working and just doing that work, and it keeps people from going rogue and sort of doing things and not communicating with each other. And so I just think it's a nightmare, and especially if you're living in different parts of the country. I just cringe every time I hear somebody say, oh, well, we've written down that such and such is going to be a co-executor. I'm actually going to be working with a family that they have 4 co-executors, and I'm trying all my darndest to say, you need to rethink this and revisit that. That is going to be a logistical nightmare.
Wow. It's the logistics, and you're a project manager. And I mean, let's face it, I don't know, there's not many people that live in the same cities anymore. That's part of a whole other conversation of how we're so disconnected. And I think that's part of why we don't see our mature adults as, we used to have Sunday dinner and sit together and tell stories. And it's just, these things don't happen so much anymore.
They don't. Yeah. And I mean, that doesn't mean that the executor, whoever is in charge, needs to go lone wolf, right? You need to be keeping, I think communication, being clear is kind, and keeping people in the loop is what you need to do. And I think that's where it starts to break down is when there's lack of communication from the executor, from the trustee, from whoever. So just that periodic updates of like, here we are, we're still waiting to get this transferred over, right? Just like those periodic updates can move mountains in terms of preventing the breakdown and family fighting. So it's like I said.
Yeah, it's like a continual bridge, like building this bridge over to, instead of creating the gap. No communication is dangerous.
And then people will say, well, I don't want to say I preference one kid over another. And I say, make the kid that you like the least the executor. I'm kidding, I'm joking, but but I'm like, it is not, some sort of prized pig that they've gotten, right? It's hard work.
We don't have the conversation, so therefore we think because they were picked, they were selected, they were this. If we're having these open conversations and setting expectations about everybody's role and how we want everything to go, that melts away a bit.
Yeah, it does.
It's when there's not the communication that everybody's prickly comes out.
Yes.
And they're feeling defensive, or I wasn't selected, or and it's like, gosh, if we could just have these conversations openly, that could all be avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and let's get over the fact that, your brother stole your Legos, when y'all were when you were 8, right? So a lot of this comes from, repressed, childhood issues, which I understand. But, that doesn't mean that you then say, oh, I'm just going to name Co just because I don't want to get into the conflict.
Yeah. And we were just talking about living more in like a digital world where, we can Zoom, we can have the wonderful technology that allows us to tape this podcast and record it. That's all wonderful. However, the digital world has opened up another level of, because you talk about tangible assets and digital assets, correct?
Yeah.
So, do you want to touch on both a little bit?
Yeah.
Because they both exist, and as far as planning for each.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, it's sort of been a wild west over the last couple of years of companies figuring out, how do we negotiate both the privacy laws that exist, maybe, the computer fraud and abuse, right? The Secure Communications Act, and then giving people or families, executors, the agents access to digital assets, whether somebody is incapacitated or whether they've died. And so it's sort of been this gray world of, okay, how do we handle this? And it hasn't yet caught up, and there's not really, I'd say, a one-size-fits-all protocol of how you're supposed to deal with digital assets. But there's not a defined definition of all digital assets, but I sort of say, like, anything you touch with a keyboard is a digital asset, and those need to be incorporated into your estate plan. And what I mean by that is, there are different types of digital assets: those that have, financial value, those that have sentimental value. Of course, your photos, your videos, things like that. And then those that have exchange value, maybe your airline points, your Amazon points, right? What have you. And so including those in your estate plan. So what I always encourage people to do is talk with their attorney and say, hey, are my digital assets reflected in my will, my trust, my power of attorney, and that's a conversation that you need to have with your attorney. But then there are also ways, like I said, that they can be included. Make sure when you're doing that inventory we had talked about earlier, you're including those assets, right? For if you have an Etsy account where you make, customized Christmas ornaments, right, each year, and there are funds sitting there, or your PayPal account, or the utilities that you pay online, or crypto, of course, right, if you're into cryptocurrency or NFTs. But I'd say the biggest thing the biggest casualty I see come out of this is when someone dies unexpectedly and they don't have the unlock code to a phone or the password to a computer, and then they lose those digital photos, that cloud storage, voice memos, right, whatever, and those things, they can be really hard to get access to retroactively. So there are ways that you can sort of name a beneficiary to some of those digital assets. So for instance, Google has an inactive account manager that you can name for someone to take over after a certain level of inactivity, so 3 months or more. So like I've named my husband. I love this tool because it not only helps you plan for incapacity, but also for death. So I've made my husband my Google inactive account manager, so he'd be able to access my Google Photos, my email, right, my storage, and things like that. Apple has a great legacy contact tool that you can utilize to name a legacy contact. I think you could name up to 5 people, 13 or over, to give access to your Apple account. And then, of course, Facebook has one as well. I think they were the ones that really came out of the gate and said, okay, Houston, you've got a problem. We've got a problem. People are calling in after someone has died or reaching out and saying, I want to close down my loved one's account, right? I want to memorialize it. So these are called online tools, and they're in essence sort of cousins to beneficiaries, if you will. So I really love that a lot of these companies are sort of catching up with how do we allow people to, in essence, name beneficiaries and those delegates to these assets that may be behind those privacy laws and the terms of service that don't allow third-party access. And I know I'm really nerding out here, but that's sort of the long and the short of why it's important for people to capture those things. How do you store photos? What email accounts do you use? And are they different for different accounts? Have you utilized any of those online tools as part of your plan? And make sure that that's being captured somewhere.
Oh, I love it though. Yeah. I mean, this is the things you don't, like when everybody's talking, you're thinking these high level, like, my do not resuscitate and my all these directives and things. But this is like the everyday stuff. This is like you have logins and pins and passwords and and what happens, and do you get locked out because you've tried too many times, and I mean, there's all these things that you don't think of until you need it, right? And so I think that was a great moment there. Thank you for sharing all of that.
And so at the bare minimum, make sure a trusted contact has the unlock code to your phone, right? The password to your computer. They may not necessarily be able to log in to all of those third-party accounts, but at least if they go into their phone, they're like, oh, they have a Bank of America app. They must bank with Bank of America. It can sometimes help them sort of reverse engineer.
I was just going to say, you're going to the back door then. You're like, okay, how do we find out? Here, these are the apps, right? Follow the trail.
Exactly.
Well, this has been, and so just to clarify, as we start to wrap up here, it's been amazing. I really appreciate all of your time and knowledge, and gosh, I feel like you started because in the same way I started was like, this is my passion project because of, I felt like, okay, I feel like I have something I can share with other adult kids so that they're taking different steps with their family, or at least having the different conversations, right? I can't foresee what's going to happen, but if there's more conversation going on in these spaces, I'll be so thrilled. And if a percentage of people planning and being on the proactive legacy side of your, services, that if those, and with estate attorneys, if that percentage increases, then wonderful, right?
Right.
So just to be clear, I want to be clear to everybody, for your services, you're more of a project manager. You say you're not a fiduciary.
Yeah.
Go to your attorney. You're giving the roadmap. You're giving them back time and saving them the calls of how many times do you have to say my husband passed away to every representative.
Absolutely. So we're that quarterback and that for the executor, and then I like to say a personal trainer for organization, right, and sort of the legacy realm. So we're helping people in both of those sides, working alongside the professionals that they may already have. We're helping to complement all of that work.
That's wonderful. My goodness. Well, so if we can end with what's one thing you wish everyone listening would do today or in the next week to make life easier for their loved ones down the road?
Yeah, I think it's the simplest thing, and it's free and easy, is write a list of your assets and debts, right? And including those digital assets. I think that is something that is so simple, that is so easy that you can do, and something that you can work on as you close accounts or you move banks, right? That you're just doing, and it gives people that roadmap. That's really easy to do. And that will help, like I said, both if they have to take over paying your bills if you're incapacitated, right? So it will help with both sides, right? The care that you may need down the road, end of life, and then after we're gone.
Well, Rachel, I really do thank you again. And I think this service, it's like you've identified a gap in what exists out there. And I'm sure the families that you're helping are just so grateful. It's like people don't know what they don't know. So you're giving them the option of, let me lead you and guide you. And so hopefully that's helping them heal and move through their process like better and sooner or quicker. You're offering a service that I think will give everyone peace and guidance in such a time that's so fragile and delicate and difficult. So everyone, there'll be show notes to how you find Rachel. Once again, her book is called Late to Your Own Funeral, and her company is called AfterLight. So if you're listening only, it's After LIGHT.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome, Rachel. Well, thanks again, and I hope to see you on the other side of the screen another time soon.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.